Hey folks, it's Dr. Gilchrist, and as you can see, we are talking about motivation and emotion. This is what you will be watching sometime before Wednesday so that you can be caught up with this information and help you prepare for our next exam. Remember that on Monday we are doing project work, so make sure that you watch this lecture because we will not be having any class lecture on Monday. You are going to work on your projects. So we're going to mostly focus on motivation and meeting some of our different needs for this lecture, and ideally starting by Wednesday, we will be talking about emotional experiences. So what is motivation? So I asked you last week in the forums how you were feeling in terms of motivation, and most of you said that right about this point of the semester, your motivation's not good. Now, sometimes in terms of motivation, it can be really hard for us to define, but it's one of those things where we tend to know that we have motivation and we know when we don't. When we're motivated, we're going to do what's needed to meet our goals. When we're not motivated, it's hard to get us to do anything. We don't really have a lot of get up and go. And that is a very intuitive understanding of what motivation is. So motivation is ultimately some sort of biological need or some sort of desire, whether it is environmental, social, psychological, that energizes our behavior and it helps direct it towards some sort of goal. So that could be, I'm hungry, I'm going to go get food. That's my goal. Or it could be, I have a need to spend time with other people. I'm going to go call my friends to get that goal met. So that's really what motivation is. So I have a question for you, and I want you to think about this just a little bit on your own time. Why do you think that people go to college? Now, most people your age will probably say that you go to college because you want to get a good job or because you want to make money. And those are absolutely valid reasons for wanting to get a job. There are other motivations that people may have as well. So for example, for some people, college is an opportunity to be exposed to information that you otherwise would not have gotten. And yeah, I know that some people will say, well, there's the internet. How many people are actually disciplined enough to actually go on the internet and basically kind of treat it like a college curriculum? I generally don't think most people have that kind of self-discipline. So it could be because you want a job, you want money, or it could be for more internal reasons, such as you want to learn more, you want to expand your knowledge, you want to open your world. So there are a variety of different reasons, whether occurring outside of ourselves, which we would call extrinsic motivation. And there can be reasons that are internal for us, like our need for knowledge or our wanting to grow. And those can be what we call intrinsic motivations. So people are going to have a wide variety of reasons for why they choose to do things. And the things that motivate one person may not necessarily be the same things that motivate other people. So we're going to talk about 3 different perspectives that have been used to explain motivation. We're going to talk about drive reduction theory, we're going to talk about arousal theory, and we're going to finish up with one you probably know very well, Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. So we're going to start by talking about drive reduction theory. Oh, I'm blocking text. Let me go move my head. There we go. So drive reduction theory is largely based on biology and physiology. So you are going to have these instances where you have different physiological needs such as food or drink. So you need food. You need water to hydrate you. That is going to create what we call an aroused state of tension that basically is going to motivate you in some sort of way to satisfy that need. So you will have a need for something like food or water. This will create a state of tension that will not go away until you engage in the behaviors that reduce that state of tension. So the goal of drive reduction theory, and the goal when you're trying to deal with these drives, is what is called homeostasis. So homeostasis is about maintaining a very balanced, constant internal state. So you don't want to be too hungry and you don't want to be too full. You don't want to be too cold, but you don't want to be too hot. So let's kind of go through an example of how drive reduction theory works. So it's getting at about 11 o'clock and my stomach starts to rumble and I start to feel really hungry. And I can't really focus on anything else that's going on around me because that sense of hunger is creating a state of tension in my body. And that state is going to drive me toward engaging in different behaviors to satisfy that need. So I will eat something to reduce that drive, and thus I will be at a state of homeostasis. Now, something that is kind of related to drives. So drives, we're going to try to reduce those drives whenever possible. And let's be completely honest, hunger or thirst are basically psychological concepts. They are not actually things that exist. They're constructs. But we often talk about feeling hungry or feeling thirsty. These are very intuitive terms. But we also have what are known as incentives. So our needs will push us to reduce our drives. We also have incentives. These are basically positive or negative stimuli that can help pull us toward reducing those drives. And generally what we're going to find is that incentives can often be functioning as rewards for us as well. But what we find is that when we have a drive and an incentive is also kind of acting on that drive and is acting in accordance with that drive, that's going to pull us even more towards reducing those drives. So maybe I'm hungry, but I could probably get through the next hour without feeling like I need to eat. But if somebody starts baking bread nearby, I'm hungry, and now that incentive has further pulled me towards needing to reduce my hunger. So maybe I would be okay being hungry for an hour until I get to eat. But then somebody bakes bread, or there's chocolate chip cookies that are warming in the oven and I smell them. All of those things are going to work together to pull me to try to reduce that drive as much as possible. Now, here's the thing about drive reduction theory. Drive reduction theory is almost primarily concerned with our physiological, biological needs and reducing the drives that are produced by those needs. But the thing is, there are some things that drive reduction theory cannot explain. So drive reduction theory is all about getting that state of homeostasis. So we don't want to be in too high of a state of arousal. The goal is always to reduce arousal. If you're too hungry, that is too high of a state of arousal. You're too tense. The same is true if you need to use the bathroom and you can't get to one right away, or if you're too thirsty. Those are going to be states where there's just too much arousal going on. There's too much tension. So drive reduction theory is always about reducing tension. But arousal theory says that we are looking for an optimum level of arousal. So in drive reduction theory, we're seeking to reduce our arousal with behavior. But arousal theory says that we are looking for optimum levels of arousal. We're not always trying to reduce it. Sometimes we actually need to increase our level of arousal. And I mean, think about it. There are so many different things that we do that are designed to enhance our arousal that drive reduction theory can't explain. People go on thrill rides, they go bungee jumping, they go mountain climbing, they have a need for curiosity, they watch horror movies. None of these things can be explained by drive reduction theory because you're always trying to reduce tension. But people and animals engage in behaviors that are designed to enhance arousal. And so Arousal theory says that we are looking for an optimum level. If our arousal is too low, we are going to engage in behaviors that enhance that. Maybe that means drinking some coffee. Maybe that means going and doing something exciting to bring your mood up. If your arousal is too high, like you're too anxious, you're going to engage in behaviors that reduce it. So something that actually kind of relates to this is something that I talk about in some other classes that is referred to as the Yerkes-Dodson law. And the Yerkes-Dodson law basically says that for certain types of tasks, we're going to do pretty well on them if we have kind of a moderate level of arousal. So let me kind of see if I can draw this for you a little bit. We'll see how this goes. But Yerkes-Dodson law, oh gosh, oh, this wants me to draw a line. Okay. Let me see. Can I draw? I can't. I can't do free form. So we're just going to go ahead and exit out of this. But basically it has an inverted U-shaped curve. So the idea here is that we're looking for a moderate level of arousal. So if you're trying to shoot free throws for a basketball game, you don't want to have too low arousal. You won't actually care about doing your best if you're barely able to be awake, which is what low arousal would be. If your arousal is too high, you're going to be so nervous and so anxious that you can barely hold that basketball. So we want an optimal level of arousal. You need some arousal to be able to energize you, but you don't want to have so much arousal that you're anxious and you can't actually focus on the task. So the Yerkes-Dodson law actually underlies a lot of performance. We want an optimum level of arousal that's not too high or too low. Now, finally, we're going to finish with one I know that you've heard of, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. So the general rule with Maslow's hierarchy of human needs is that in general, certain needs that we have are going to have priority over others. Generally, your most basic needs, like your need for food, water, and shelter, are going to take priority over self-esteem, for example. So certain needs are going to have priority over others, and in general, your most basic survival needs are going to be met first. Now, one thing that I will also try to really impress upon you is that everybody is motivated by different things, and this absolutely extends to Maslow's hierarchy. At any given point, many people that you know are going to occupy different levels of the hierarchy at any given point. So here is Maslow's hierarchy. So generally, the rule is that your most basic level needs must be met before you can actually get up higher in this hierarchy. So your physiological needs come first. Those are survival level needs. You need food to live. You need water to live. Those are not in question. And if you're not able to get those, you are going to focus on meeting those needs. If you do get those needs met, you can start to focus on the higher level needs. Next is your need for safety. You need to feel that the world is organized, predictable. This includes things like shelter, making sure that you are in an environment that is stable and secure. So maybe, so for example, if you are in a country that is currently being damaged by war or by conflict, or if you've had a natural disaster in your area, you are probably not going to feel like the world is predictable, safe, and stable. You might have lost your home. You might have lost your job or your livelihood. Above that, we have our belongingness and love needs. So this is our need to love others and to be loved by others, to feel like we're accepted and to belong, basically. Above that, we have our esteem needs. So our need for self-esteem, our need for achievement, recognition, and respect from others. And then finally, Maslow talks about self-actualization, which is all about meeting your fullest and unique potential. And remember that Maslow is a humanistic psychologist. He is all about people reaching their highest potential. And his argument is that very few people actually become self-actualized because you have to have all of these other needs met first. And generally speaking, if you are in a situation such as here, where people were surviving hurricanes or natural disasters, you are probably not going to think about whether or not you are meeting your unique potential. You've got more important pressing needs to focus on at that point, such as food, water, shelter, a job. All of those things are going to be way more important for you at the time than meeting your self-actualization needs. And Maslow believed that very few people got to this because they couldn't get those other needs met. Now, later on in his life, Maslow also included something called self-transcendence, which was actually higher than self-actualization, where we find meaning and identity beyond ourselves. We think of ourselves as part of a greater collective. So now we're going to focus on a few of Maslow's different needs that were discussed. I'm going to talk about hunger and eating behavior and the need to belong. Your book is also going to talk about achievement motivations, so I would encourage you to read that in your book as well. So I don't know about you, but talking about hunger, one of our most basic psychological and physiological needs, our need for food and to eat, is what we're going to talk about next. And y'all, I've got a bunch of Halloween candy next to me, so I will do my best not to have the urge to snack. But if I were hungry, what sort of things could I expect that my body would do if I were hungry? And for many people, what you will probably experience, what you often think of as being your hunger sense, is that your stomach rumbles. And you might be kind of curious, does that actually relate to our sense of hunger? And it turns out that it actually does. So Walter Cannon and Washburn, A.L. Washburn, they were kind of interested in the relationship between our hunger signals and the different physiological markers that we have for those hunger signals. So Cannon and Washburn actually decided to do something really interesting that I can't believe got approved. So Washburn basically agreed to swallow a balloon, and when the balloon was inflated, it was actually equipped with a recording device that would basically measure Washburn's stomach contractions, and then any time that Washburn felt hungry, he would press a key. Now, what's kind of interesting is that if you look, we have kind of a measurement of any time that Washburn reported hunger pangs, and then whether or not his stomach was contracting at the same time. And as you can kind of see, there's a very, very strong relationship here between the stomach contractions, which you see here, and when Washburn felt hungry. So it's kind of clear that our stomach is actually sending hunger signals to our brain. And in particular, it's the job of our hypothalamus to basically keep track of those hunger signals. So your body is designed to keep track of the energy that you have. And for us, glucose is a major source of energy. And if this is low, messages are basically going to be sent from our body to our brain that our energy supplies are low and we need to replenish them with more glucose, aka we need more food. So the hypothalamus is basically going to be this critical source of tracking our hunger. Remember that the hypothalamus is responsible for a lot of our basic needs. So it helps trigger our fight or flight response. It kickstarts the sympathetic nervous system. It also keeps track of our sex drive, our hunger and eating behaviors, our drinking behaviors, and it helps us with things like our body temperature. So if your blood sugar is low, a message will be sent to the brain, and it will be the job of the hypothalamus to basically help manage that. Now, you are not actually looking at a human hypothalamus here. This is the hypothalamus of a rat, because much of what we know about the hypothalamus's response to hunger has been through doing research on rats, and in particular, damaging different parts of their hypothalamus to see what happens to the rats as a result. So one thing that you should know just looking at this picture, the hypothalamus is not just actually one brain area, it's actually a cluster of different types of nuclei, and we're going to talk about each of those in a minute. So I want you to focus on this blue nucleus right here in this figure. Now, let's be very clear. You cut open the human brain or you cut open a rat brain, it is not actually going to be colored blue. It is colored blue here to aid your understanding. So what you're looking at here is what is called the lateral hypothalamus. And so we call it lateral. That is the direction. It implies it's on the outside. So this nucleus is on the outside of the hypothalamus, thus it is the lateral hypothalamus. This part of the hypothalamus is really critical for stimulating our hunger sense. If this area is destroyed, there will be no interest in eating. So researchers have actually destroyed the lateral hypothalamus of a rat, and the rats basically become anorexic. Now, I am not talking about anorexic in terms of anorexia nervosa in humans, the eating disorder. I am talking about literal anorexia, where the rats will basically starve themselves to death. Now, on the other hand, I want you to take a look at this little rat. Now, this little rat looks like a little puffball, and it looks very, very cute. It looks kind of like a plushie or something cute like that. But I would impress upon you, this rat is too fat to walk, which is probably not an ideal state of health. So this is the kind of rat that you will get when you destroy the ventromedial hypothalamus. So again, we're kind of referring to those anatomical directions. Medial implies toward the center. Ventro means down. So that is the nucleus that's colored in purple. And this is critical for our sense of feeling full. It's a hunger depressant. Another term that we use for this is satiety, feeling satiated, feeling full. And so researchers have found that if you destroy the ventromedial hypothalamus of a rat, the rat will continue to eat well past the point of fullness to the point where it becomes too fat to walk. So this is a case where we will get excessive eating. So the hypothalamus has different centers for stimulating our hunger and also depressing our hunger sense. Now, in addition to the hypothalamus also doing this, I would be remiss if I didn't actually talk about some of the hunger hormones that are also operating at different points that are helping you either increase your appetite or depress your appetite. So if you go to your book, you'll actually hear about a few different hunger hormones. Ones that enhance your appetite include things like ghrelin. This is a hormone that is only secreted when the stomach is empty, and it basically sends an "I'm hungry" signal. Additionally, there is orexin, which is actually secreted by the hypothalamus. And then we have several hormones that are involved in decreasing our hunger sense. That includes things like insulin, leptin, and also PYY. So one of the things that kind of comes into play when we talk about the hypothalamus, not only is it keeping track of how much energy we need and making sure that we eat enough food to meet our energy reserves, but your weight has what is called a set point. So you can kind of think of it like a thermostat. Now, weight is kind of a rough way to talk about how much energy you have at any given point. Fat is a stored form of energy, and so if you have extra fat on your body, that is extra energy that could potentially be used at times when food is less plentiful. And your hypothalamus is basically keeping track of all of that. So your body has a set point. Now, set point is controversial, and I'll kind of talk about why in a little bit. So your body generally tends to want to find a weight that it wants to settle at. weight. And there are a couple of different things that influence your set point. Heredity is one of those big things. So heredity can influence where your body and what weight your body wants to settle at, but it also influences your body type. So, for example, you cannot necessarily change where your body wants to store fat and where it wants to gain weight first and where it wants to lose weight first. So, for example, I am generally pretty bottom heavy. I have pretty broad shoulders, but in general, I tend to gain weight in my hips and in my thighs, and that is totally normal. Likewise, there are other people who tend to gain weight in their stomachs. That is also very common and very normal. So the thing is, even if I lose a lot of weight, even if I lose a lot of weight, my overall body type is not going to change. I am still going to be bottom heavy regardless of what I weigh. And heredity largely influences that. So let's talk a little bit more about this weight thermostat though. So generally, remember, food here is being treated as a proxy for energy. So if you lose weight, we know a few things are going to happen. So first of all, let's just get this kind of out of the way because I know it's pretty popular to talk about. You might have heard the idea that if you don't eat enough food, you will enter what is called starvation mode. And so that's kind of the idea that at some point, if you're trying to restrict your food intake, to lose weight or to diet or something like that, your body is going to think it's starving, and thus it is going to try to fight every, it's basically going to try to hold on to every calorie that it gets. So there's a lot of research that shows that in general, your metabolism is not really going to slow down very much unless you're cutting at least unless you're cutting less than 50, like if you're significantly reducing your caloric intake. So if you basically were eating less than half of what you had been eating before for several weeks, your metabolism isn't really going to be affected unless you're doing a drastic caloric deficit for several weeks. And even then, research has only found that it drops by about 10%. So in general, starvation mode is not going to be that common unless you are actually starving. But we do know that when you lose weight, sometimes it can be easy to put weight back on, but it's not necessarily because of starvation mode. It's just that in general, the less that you weigh, the less energy it requires to carry your body around. So we know a couple of different things. In general, the more that you weigh, the more energy that you need to basically live your life. It takes more energy to carry extra weight. And additionally, when you lose weight, there are also other things that decrease. So something that we know about people is that they tend to fidget. And this is sometimes what's referred to as NEAT, so sometimes it's called non-exercise energy thermogenesis. So sometimes people will do things like fidget or they'll move their legs. We know that when you lose weight, you do that less as well. There's less fidgeting. There's less like bouncing your leg around or pacing around. So in general, when you lose weight, your food intake you will start to feel hungrier, and that might force you to increase your food intake, and your energy output will decrease. But when you gain weight, the opposite will happen. You will not feel hungry as often, and additionally, your energy output will decrease. You cannot have a metabolism that actually stops. I occasionally will see some of that where people say my metabolism stopped. Even coma patients have a metabolism because a metabolism is basically your body doing what it needs to do to keep you alive. So the only way your metabolism is really going to stop is if you are dead. Okay, now one thing that I will mention about the set point, because I know we've spent a lot of time on this, in today's world, we have a lot of hyper-palatable foods like these that it's very, very easy to overindulge in, that we don't always feel full from because it's just hyper palatable, full of fat, sugar, and salt, and that makes it really easy to overindulge. And researchers have actually suggested that in this kind of system, where food is plentiful, readily available, and incredibly addictive in terms of its properties, that we don't actually have a set point. We have what is called a settling point, a point where our weight wants to tend to settle. And one of the things that we know is that your body can create new settling points. So if you lose a lot of weight and you maintain that for many, many years, that can in effect become your new settling point. Or if you gain weight, that can become your new settling point. So I would say we don't have a hard and fast set point, but we do have different points where our weight wants to settle based on the environment that we find ourselves in and based on other lifestyle factors, how active we are, and so on. So your book talks about this a little bit. I'm going to go into more detail about certain things than others. But I really want to start this off because I know that this can be a really contentious topic. We need to separate in general. This is what I believe. And you can feel free to disagree with me or not. So I will be completely honest with you and tell you that I have lost a lot of weight. When I graduated high school, I was well over 200 pounds. Please don't ask me how I lost the weight. I still don't quite know. I'm going to chalk it up to being more active on my college campus and walking everywhere and not having a car. So I know what it's like to be treated poorly for your weight. I think it's awful. And in general, I think that we should not be judging people or treating people poorly because of what they look like. We need to get this idea out of our head. We need to kind of separate worthiness and being treated with respect from health. And I don't always think we do a very good job of that. So when I talk about some of the health risks that are associated with carrying extra weight, please know that I am not talking about your worth as a person. I am not talking about whether or not you are attractive as a person. I am talking specifically about this in terms of health. And let's be completely honest. There are things that all of us can do, no matter how much we weigh, to be healthier. I could certainly be doing more. We all could. And so hopefully some of the things that I'm talking about here will apply to all of us because in general, most of us aren't getting enough exercise. Most of us are not always eating the healthiest foods, and we all can take steps to incorporate healthier behaviors into our lives. And that may mean that we lose weight, but it may not mean that we lose weight. But carrying extra weight can have costs just as being incredibly underweight can carry a health cost. So here's what we know. Fat is an ideal form of stored energy, particularly during famine. So when we talk about the macros, the kilocalories, which are measurements of energy, fat contains 9 kilocalories compared to 1 macro of protein and 1 macro of carbohydrate, which both contain 4 kilocalories. So fat is very, very energyful. But as I kind of said, there are some findings out there that do link having excess weight, carrying excess weight to having increased health risks. That includes having high blood pressure. That includes an increased risk of adult onset diabetes. And we don't even call it adult onset anymore. It's actually type 2 diabetes, which is related to insulin resistance. We have different cardiovascular problems, including heart disease. And some people have actually linked things like Alzheimer's disease to carrying extra weight. So I know that the body mass index is not a perfect metric. It's a very quick and dirty metric. Obviously, it's not going to be a replacement for blood work. I would generally say if you want to better look at your health, don't just focus on weight. Look at all of the different measures that you can. But what we kind of see is that in general, here we have relative risk of death. In general, having a healthier body weight is going to be pretty important. That's going to carry a lower risk of mortality compared to being underweight or overweight, but that's especially true at the extremes of obesity. But I want to focus on the fact that in general, there are many negative social effects being associated with obesity, and that's the part that I really can't stand. People treat you differently when you look obviously different from people around you. We know especially that if you're female, there is often a greater penalty if you are overweight or obese, and that's often because we are subject to a narrower beauty standard than people. So what you're looking at here on a 1 through 7 scale, I don't like that they set it to 0. That's a bad graph. But you can kind of see here, compared to normal and overweight men and women, you can see that in general, people were more likely to hire somebody that they perceived to be a normal weight. They were less likely to hire somebody who was overweight, especially if they were female. Now, one thing that I will mention, and I thankfully never had this happen to me because I often didn't have the money to go to the doctor, but I know that fat shaming and things like that happen at the doctor, and that's really frustrating because you're going to the doctor specifically because you want to be healthy, and that's a place where some people are getting treated poorly when they're trying to do the right thing and advocate for themselves. And because of this, we do know that people who are overweight or obese are going to be less likely to seek out health care because they are worried about how they're going to be treated. And going back to this risk of mortality, I can't help but wonder if part of the reason that we see that is because doctors very much do have a social stigma, and do have a prejudice against people who are overweight or obese. Those are the people that they need to be helping. And if you're less likely to seek health care, that means that you're dealing with health problems that you otherwise wouldn't really, you're not going to get the help you need for it. And that means things are going to get worse. And so I can see why this can be such a frustrating thing. And in general, people are just awful. Like, they say terrible things to overweight people or obese people. So there was a tweet that came out 10 years ago. Well, actually 13. So about 10 years ago. By the way, he's an evolutionary psychologist type, and he still has awful tweets to this day. I'd like to block him. I basically block him whenever I see him. Dear obese PhD applicants, if you didn't have the willpower to stop eating carbs, you won't have a willpower to do a dissertation. I call false on that. I know plenty of people who have the willpower, and also, can we stop it with the carb bashing? Okay. And then other people have engaged in fat shaming week. In general, I would say that one of the biggest problems with being overweight or obese is the social stigma that you deal with. People are not nice to you all the time. And I've experienced that firsthand because when I did lose weight, it was interesting to see how I was occasionally treated differently by people. And I can't tell if it's because of my confidence. Maybe my confidence had changed, or if it was how the way I looked, but I did notice that people occasionally treated me differently. And this is where I have a problem. We need to separate actual health issues from issues related to general human decency and respect. And in general, the research repeatedly shows shaming people doesn't actually encourage them to do better. And I know that some people might take issue with this, but in general, I think shaming people into changing their behavior is a bad idea. When I was overweight, if somebody had shamed me, the last thing I wanted to do was take their comments into consideration and go, hey, maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't eat as many cookies tonight. Maybe I should go for a walk more often and get more active and just focus on eating better and being more active, because I can tell you, I didn't eat great. I wasn't very active. I probably could have used those things in my life at the time. I would have felt a lot better about myself if I had, not because I was losing weight, but because I was accomplishing something. I was making a goal. But in general, when I would be shamed for my weight, the last thing I wanted to do was change for the better. I wanted to comfort myself. I felt bad, and that meant turning to food, because food for me was my coping mechanism when I felt bad. I'm a stress eater, and I still have to watch that. And in general, we know that shaming people often makes them turn to their coping mechanisms. And in general, those coping mechanisms are not always healthy. Most of us do not have the best coping mechanisms. So let's talk a little bit about why it can be difficult to keep the weight off for those who are interested in doing so. So in general, when we talk about fat, you've got about 30 billion to 40 billion fat cells in your body. And we know that when you gain weight, here's what's kind of interesting. So when you gain weight, your fat cells are going to basically increase in size. And when they can't increase in size anymore, they're going to make new fat cells. And once those new fat cells have been created, they can't go away. You can't just destroy them after they've been created. The only thing that they can do at that point is shrink. So here's what we find. Here's somebody who was never obese. Here's somebody who is obese. And you can see that the fat cells are larger in size and in number. Now, what about somebody like me who's lost a lot of weight? What do my fat cells look like? They look like this. So again, once you create those new fat cells, you can't destroy them. All they can do is shrink. So for some people, those fat cells are not going to go away. They're only going to get smaller. And it's part of the reason why a lot of people who lose a lot of weight struggle with excess skin. It's not real. Some of it is skin, but some of it are those extra fat cells that were created in that weight gain process. And so that's kind of fighting an uphill battle. Those fat cells are there, and they're just waiting to get bigger again. It can be hard. Now, in general, I would say calories in, calories out can work for most people, but it's kind of complicated. In general, if you're wanting to try to lose weight, a pretty good straightforward way to do it is make sure that you're not taking in more calories than you burn. So basically, watch your portion sizes, try to eat calorie-dense foods that leave you full, lots of fruits and vegetables, and frankly, we all should be doing that, and get more physical activity. And in general, I'd say get physical activity because it feels good and it's a great stress reliever. But we know that sometimes it's not just calories in, calories out. So for example, if you are assigned female at birth and you have a menstrual cycle, there's no way around it. At some point in your monthly cycle, you're going to retain water. And that's going to stick around until you shed that extra water. But what I will say is that your body does have that weight thermostat. It is constantly keeping track of the energy coming in and the energy that is going out. So if you severely cut calories, remember that when you drop weight, you don't need as much energy to carry your body around as you did before. So your calorie needs have to change. So what this means is that even after weight loss, if you are now in a smaller body than you were, it is going to take less energy to move your body around. Just in general, it's going to take less energy for that. So you can't go back to the way you were eating before. So it's pretty common to hear the statistic that 95% of all diets fail, and most people gain back almost all the weight they lose and more after a period of 5 years. I can tell you that's probably not exactly the case. That 95% statistic is based on a 1950 study with an incredibly small sample size. And in general, it was focused on crash dieting. And in general, crash dieting is not good for anybody. What's better is to build healthy, sustainable changes in your life. Focus on being healthy over focusing on a particular clothing size or a particular weight. But if you're in a smaller body, it's going to take less energy to carry your body around. You may not be able to go back and eat the way that you used to. So, because that will lead to you gaining, because now you require less energy. You have less weight on you. You have less to carry around. You're engaging in less non-exercise energy thermogenesis. You're not fidgeting as much. And because of that, that can lead to regain if you go back to those old habits. So it's part of the reason why you shouldn't focus on dieting, because most diets are not sustainable. Focus on sustainable, long-term, healthy change. In general, we can all do that. So genetics really matter. We know that identical twins will have a similar weight even when they're raised apart. And additionally, in adoptive children, weight resembles biological parents, not adoptive parents. But let's be completely honest. Your environment matters, and your book actually talks about some of the ways that our environment can set us up to fail when it comes to issues related to weight. So a couple of different things that do seem to play a role include things like friends. I don't know about you, but when I go out with my friends, I am a lot more likely to overindulge. And research has actually found most of us tend to eat more when we're eating with other people. Portion size and serving size matters. So if you take a big bowl, you're going to eat more out of that big bowl than if you had a smaller bowl. Variety affects it. So if you go to a buffet, you're going to be more likely to overeat there just because there's more food for you to choose from. So we have a lot of these environmental factors that are really making it hard to keep at a healthy weight or to be healthy at all. Some people have said that our environment really promotes obesity. In general, most of us are not getting sufficient physical activity. In general, we find the U.S. government right now recommends 150 minutes a week. And ideally, they were originally going to recommend more, but they thought that they actually lowered it to 150 because that's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And most people can't even manage that. And I want to be clear, physical activity, the goal of that should not be to lose weight. It is a great thing for your body. So, for example, I just ran 45 minutes today. I do not necessarily believe that you need to run. I like to run, but I think it's important for us to find physical activity that is fun and also challenging. So it's important to find something that really works for you. Sometimes going for walks can be enough. In general, the quality of our food is really poor. It is hyper palatable. It is designed to get you addicted. And again, I'm staring at the Sour Patch Kids over there. It's usually full of fat, salt, and sugar. And that makes it really hard. Sleep deprivation. In general, your body needs sleep to help you function properly and to help your body basically clear out the day's energy and the toxins that build up throughout the day. And most of us are sleep deprived, and that actually can affect our weight as well. And as I've mentioned, there are a lot of social influences. So if you want to know what I think it's important for people to be healthy. And I don't always think it's easy to be healthy when you're underweight or significantly overweight. I think both of those extremes can be very difficult, but I think every single one of us can take steps to be healthy today. Because in general, you can't always tell that somebody is healthy based on how they look. But I think we all have things that we can do to try to be healthier, whether that is move more, pick better quality food, cut down on portion sizes, get a good night's sleep, and focus on our mental health. All of those things can help us be healthier. And there are some that will say that you don't necessarily owe anybody health, but the truth of the matter is that when I'm healthy, I know that the people, and I'm easier to deal with people. I can help people more, and they can help me more when I'm in a better frame of physical and mental health. So I don't necessarily know that I always agree that you don't owe anybody health. If you want to be a part of society and interact with people, I'm not saying you have to be in the best physical shape, but you should want to be in the best shape possible to be a good friend, a good partner, a good family member, and so on. And that's just my opinion. You do not have to agree with me. That's just how I feel based on my experiences. So let's make this quick and finish up by talking about our need to belong. So in general, we know that the human being is a social animal. All of us in general need to be around other people. Yes, including you introverts. You think you don't need people, but you do. And in general, we do find that being separate from other people does increase our need to want to belong to people. And you can kind of see why this would be so important. It's a key human motivation, and in general, being around other people aided our survival. In our ancestral history, having social bonds and being part of a community helped protect us against predators, especially when we're little, because kids can't fight a woolly mammoth that's attacking the village. It was also helpful to help us procure food and led to people that we could mate with and thus produce the next offspring. So these are some very clear benefits. Being social contributed to a survival advantage for Homo sapiens. It's the fact that Homo sapiens form community that helps explain why we are all Homo sapiens and very few of us are Neanderthals. Neanderthals did not build as strong social ties despite the fact that they were smarter. And because of that, that's why Homo sapiens won out, because we build community and community aids survival. Now, what are some of the benefits of belonging? Well, we have a variety of different things that we know. In general, people who feel like they belong and have a sense of belonging, they tend to report higher self-esteem. In particular, most people that feel like they belong have a greater sense of autonomy and competence. They feel like they're capable. They feel like they're able to meet their goals. And we show that we generally work and value to keep relationships. Sometimes we have such a need to belong that we will stay in unhealthy relationships and unhealthy friendships because the idea of belonging, even to somebody that may not be good for us, is more important than being alone. And so that really highlights how important our need to belong is. We will damage our own sense of self just so that we can continue belonging with other people, even when it's not good for us. Additionally, we know that ostracism, being isolated and excluded, causes problems. People who are ostracized in research studies, and these are dinky research studies where researchers go, yeah, these people over here, they didn't want to hang out with you, or they didn't want you for their group. So something small like that, even that is enough to create a depressed mood, an increase in self-defeating behavior, and aggression towards other people. Now, social networking has been a double-edged sword with this. So I know that when I was growing up, the internet was really cool because where I lived, there weren't a lot of people who thought like me. And now that I know that I'm autistic, there are communities online of women who have autism just like me, and I can learn more about myself and develop a stronger sense of what things can I do, what things do I struggle with, and it's nice to know that I'm not alone. So social networking can help fill social voids. It can also help us keep in touch with family that are far apart. The problem is that the more time that we spend online, the more our offline relationships tend to suffer. But again, social networking, while it enhances our sense of connectedness, we often tend to be less inhibited online than we are in person. Sometimes it's easier to cross those boundaries. And additionally, it keeps us focused on us. We get that social media envy, where we're looking at the best part of people's lives. We're basically looking at the highlight reel of somebody's life on social media and thinking that we're messed up because we don't have something like that. Never compare your insides to somebody's outsides. So we're going to go ahead and stop here. We're a little over 50 minutes, and next time we will start by talking about theories of emotion, and I will see you next time. Bye.